Hi, my name is Morgan Johnson. I work at the New Jersey Organ and Tissue Sharing Network, and I am a kidney recipient. When I was 18, I was diagnosed with chronic kidney disease. By the time I was 21, I was in full kidney failure. I was on dialysis just shy of 2 years, and after being on dialysis, I finally received the life-saving gift of an organ transplant, a kidney transplant. I never thought in a million years that I would ever be diagnosed with chronic kidney disease. I never thought I would ever be on dialysis. I didn't even know what dialysis was. And I definitely didn't think that I would need someone else's organ, but that's my story. That's what happened to me, and I'm so grateful to the person that saved my life. It has been a life-changing experience. I no longer have to hook up to this dialysis machine anymore. I have a much better quality of life now that I am footloose and fancy-free and not attached to a dialysis machine anymore. And I'm just a very happy person. There's no other quote that makes my life happier than hearing someone say, "Carpe diem," seize the moment, because that's exactly what I do. I encourage all of my friends, all of my family to say yes to organ donation. Put it on your license. I thought I was invincible. I never thought in a million years that I would ever be diagnosed with chronic kidney disease. I never thought for a minute that I would ever be on dialysis. I didn't even know what dialysis was. And I certainly didn't think that I would need someone to save my life through organ donation. But those are the cards that were dealt to me. That is my story. It is my testimony. I've gotten through a very difficult time in my life, and someone was generous enough to save my life. So now, any opportunity that I get to share with other people how wonderful this gift is, I let them know. Put it on your license. Save someone's life. It's a precious, precious gift. I know because I have a life-saving kidney transplant. Share your wishes with your friends and your family. Hey, we're not going to live forever, so check it off, put it on your license, and save someone's life.
My name is Jackie Lou Rea. I am an assistant director here at New Jersey Sharing Network, but most and foremost, I am a donor daughter. 3.5 years ago, I lost my beloved mom, Ina Popo Lu. Popo is grandma in Chinese, and that's what everyone knew her as. Tragically, I had just picked her up from Newark Airport, and we got onto the New Jersey Turnpike and we were hit by a tractor trailer. And unfortunately, my mom perished that night. But we were fortunate enough that the first responders were there in time to at least get her on a ventilator and transport her to the local trauma center, where both my son and myself, we were all in the car together, we were transported there. And after many confirmatory tests, it was determined that unfortunately my mom had no brain function. So it was not until then that we accepted the fact that my mom was gone that the New Jersey Sharing Network approached my 3 siblings and I and asked us if we thought that my mom would want to give the gift of life. And just by virtue of the way my mom lived her life, it was a unanimous and very fast decision that we would say yes on her behalf, because unfortunately, we never had the conversation about what she would want to have done. She was 68 years old, she was healthy, she was vibrant, she was living a very, very full life, and she took very good care of herself. So, this accident just took the wind right out of all of our sails quite unexpectedly. And if there's a message that I can send out there to all the families and the entire community out there, I would say to spare yourselves the decision that my siblings and I had to make on my mom's behalf that night to give the gift of life. Talk about it with the people that you love. Talk about it, and not to say yes or no or maybe, but to at least get a feel of what you each would want to have happen should something so devastating happen to your family as well. No one gets up in the morning and says today is a great day to get hit by a truck, or that today is a great day to have a heart attack or a brain aneurysm. In the situations where donors present themselves, it is 99.9% of the time an unplanned, fully devastating and always deadly thing, that they have this opportunity and this event, if you will, to be able to choose if they want to give the gift of life or not. So we were fortunate enough that my mom was healthy enough, and she saved 3 people with her organs. At that time, she gave her kidneys to 2 New Jersey women, one who was the same age as my mom, who was 68 at the time, and the other kidney recipient is in her 40s, and both of them are alive and well. And I do know that her liver recipient is out there as well, though I have not had the pleasure of meeting her yet, but I still have hope that someday that might happen. But just the knowledge that she has been able to impact the lives of these women has just helped me so much in the healing process. And we truly, even though my mom is not the one who made that decision at that time to give the gift of life, all indication and all signs from her is that absolutely it was the right decision to make, because 2 years later, I now find myself working here at the network and working with the community and educating the community and business partners and hospital partners and everyone who will listen of why it is so important to say yes to donation. My mom's organs saved 3 people, but her tissue, which includes, for those who are unfamiliar, tissue includes cornea, it includes skin, it includes bone. Her donation has touched the lives of 43 people already through post-mastectomy reconstruction and cleft palate repair and rotator cuff repair and ACLs and MCLs and all sorts of incredible surgeries, reparative surgeries that have helped people to live healthier, stronger, pain-free lives. So I'm so very proud of my mom. She is truly my hero, truly my champion, and it is my absolute pleasure to be able to go into the community and brag about her and share her story. And one of the things that I really would like to convey is that the New Jersey Sharing Network, our main goal is to steward the gift of life through organ and tissue donation. But after that, they really take heart and make it a key point of what their reason for being is, and that is to take care of us donor families. And one of the things that we are able to do here at the Sharing Network is to create a memorial quilt that is placed on the donor remembrance quilts. So every donor family is invited to make a quilt square, and we are then invited to a special ceremony where we pin our quilt squares of our loved ones onto a quilt, and then wonderful volunteers create this beautiful quilt. And I think now we have about 29 quilts that travel sometimes throughout the country, on the request of families and others who want to show their loved ones in these memorable and lasting things that we help to create in their loved ones' memories. So it is just an incredible organization. I work a lot with donor families. I believe that what we do here offers incredible comfort at a time, whether it be a month after a tragedy or it be 15 years after a tragedy. The New Jersey Sharing Network truly takes care of the families that take care of them, and that is being champions out there in the community and saying to the community, it is important that you say yes to donation of organs and tissue. Whether you be a potential donor, a potential recipient, someone who has lost someone who has been waiting, as there are so many people throughout New Jersey and the entire country who's waiting for an organ, it is so important that we have this discussion with our families. So I thank you.
Hi, my name is Barbara Tercy. I'm the Organ and Tissue Donation Education Manager here at New Jersey Sharing Network, and I want to thank you for logging on to the NJ Sharing Network website to view this module today. Why is it important that we share information with you about the topic of organ and tissue donation? This slide here is a visual representation of just how many people are currently waiting in the United States for some type of an organ transplant. This is a picture of the University of Michigan's Spartan Stadium. It happens to be the largest stadium in the United States. It holds close to 110,000 people when it's full. So almost 10,000 more than the capacity of this stadium is the number of our fellow U.S. citizens who are waiting right now for some type of a transplant. This is the faces of some of the staff at New Jersey Sharing Network. We've been in existence for over 25 years now. There are 58 organizations like ours in the United States. We're referred to as organ procurement organizations, or OPOs. All have different names, and yet together we share a common purpose to save and enhance lives through organ and tissue donation. Here in New Jersey, we have two organizations, New Jersey Sharing Network and the Gift of Life Donor Program. We cover and work with hospitals in the 14 north and central counties in New Jersey. So if you're a nurse who works in a hospital setting in those areas, you would work with us at New Jersey Sharing Network. The Gift of Life Donor Program, which is located in Philadelphia, works with hospitals in the southern counties of New Jersey. As I go along, I'm going to share with you some information about the staff that we all work together to steward the gift of organ and tissues. And together, it's so important, all of our different roles in collaboration with the nurses that make it happen. As far as the scope of the need, here in New Jersey, we have close to 5,000 people who are waiting for some type of a transplant. Dorothea here, who's holding the end of the banner, is just one of those 5,000 people. She's been waiting for a kidney transplant for several years and has been on dialysis all that time. These are her family and friends. They've come out with her to our most recent 5K walk run, which we just held this past June, to support her, to get the word out and increase awareness about the need for organs and tissues. I think it's so important to put a face to that number. You know, we can say 120,000, 5,000, and yet each one of those is someone's family member, someone's friend. I'd like to share with you also some information about New Jersey HERO Act. New Jersey HERO Act has several components. One of them is for nurses like yourselves to receive education about the topic of organ and tissue donation and to receive a 1 contact hour continuing education credit before you renew your license as of February 2014. This picture up here is a group of public health nurses that I spoke with recently. This picture down here are New Jersey nursing students. Another component of the requirement is that every nursing student and every medical student before they graduate now has some education about the topic, so it's being incorporated into their curriculum. The reason it's a one-time requirement for nurses who've graduated is because going forward, every nurse and medical student in the state will have that information when they graduate. This picture over here happens to be my daughter in the middle there holding her driver's license. Another component of the New Jersey HERO Act is that high schools, public high schools in the state, incorporate the topic of donation into either health education or driver education classes. I think it's so important. I saw with my own daughter, she's comfortable with the conversation about donation. She knows what her wishes are. I've worked here since before she was born. And yet, in speaking with her, I realized not all of her friends and peers have necessarily had that conversation. They don't necessarily know what their wishes are, and they may not have all the information they need to make an informed decision. So with this opportunity for young people who are open-minded and can get a chance to ask questions, they can go in and when they're asked that question at the motor vehicle agency, make a very educated decision. And I'm not sure if you're aware, but once someone is 18 and they say yes to that question and have the donor designation on their driver's license, that's actually legal consent, and no one, not even a parent, can override that decision that they've made for themselves. So again, I think it's so important. Organ procurement organizations are nonprofit, federally funded 501c3 organizations. Similar to acute care hospitals that receive Medicare reimbursement, both hospitals and organ procurement organizations need to be in compliance with certain regulations surrounding how we work together to assure that families are offered the opportunity for donation for their loved one whenever it's appropriate, and that we honor the designated decision or wish of an individual whenever that's appropriate. Organizations like CMS, the Department of Health, and Joint Commission are just a few of the federal and state organizations that survey both hospitals and organizations like ours to assure that we are doing the absolute best that we can to provide as many gifts for donation and transplantation as possible. So one organ donor has the opportunity to save 8 lives. If you look at this slide, these are the organs that can be recovered and transplanted. In many cases, the kidneys go to 2 separate individuals. The lungs can be separated and go to 2 separate recipients, or one individual can receive a double lung transplant. Other organs that can be transplanted are the liver, the heart, the pancreas, and even the intestine. These are the faces of some New Jersey residents, and as you can see, they represent a variety of different ages, sex, ethnicity, and they have received different types of transplants. Just to point out a couple, Jim Radigan here, he's a retired high school educator and football coach. He received a liver transplant. He currently volunteers for us, and his way of giving back, he's so grateful, is to go out and speak with those high school students as part of the High School Heroes program. This little girl, Alaya, she received a heart transplant. The woman over here holding the microphone, her name is Denise Peoples, and she received a double lung transplant. She is so full of life. She also volunteers for us. She had a 5K team, and the name of her team was Breathin' Easy. She's just doing great. This gentleman here received a kidney and a pancreas transplant. So someone like him, he was an insulin-dependent diabetic since he was a young child. And after years of having diabetes, he started to develop some other neuropathies and ended up on dialysis. He was on dialysis for several years until he received his transplant. And the amazing thing is he's off insulin and he's off dialysis. And when I was speaking with him, he said, you know, simple things that people take for granted, like having birthday cake. He was never able to do that as a kid. And now with his transplant, he can celebrate both his birthday and the anniversary of his transplant with cake and not need any insulin. It's pretty incredible. The opportunity for organ donation is really quite rare. I think many people think that if they register to be a donor, they will be an organ donor at the time of their death. And yet it really is a rare opportunity. We receive over 30,000 phone calls to our organization every single year. Every in-hospital death is reported to us for evaluation to see if we can offer that opportunity to a family or to carry out that decision that someone has already made for themselves. And yet of that number of referrals that we receive, less than 1% of people will be able to be organ donors. And the reason that is because organ donors are those people who are in a critical care unit most often, on a ventilator, someone who has suffered a significant neurologic injury, whether it be from a trauma, a stroke, a lack of oxygen to the brain, and an anoxic event. But people who have suffered a neurologic, usually brain death, and yet have some organ or more organs available for transplant. Many more people can donate tissue. So tissues like those can be recovered from persons who've died up to 24 hours after their breathing and circulation have stopped. So again, tissue donation, which can enhance the lives of well over 50 people, is something that more people may have the opportunity to do at the time of their death. When I list all those organs and all those tissues, sometimes I think it must seem as if you've listed everything, all parts of my body? What will be left for my family to have an open casket viewing? And yet they could. It does not affect the funeral arrangements, and families could have an open casket viewing and no one would know that you were a donor unless your family shared that information with them. So with the cornea, the whole eye is not recovered. It's a contact lens size. And in place of that cornea, a lens is placed. So when the eyes are closed, no one knows that the cornea have been recovered. For someone like Susan in this picture here, receiving a corneal transplant may not be life-saving, but for someone who was blind, not able to read or drive or see their family, it's a huge gift that enhances the quality of their life every day, and they're so thankful. With skin, I'm sure you're familiar with skin being used for burn victims in grafting, and one donor can provide skin grafts for many people, and yet it has uses in addition to that for burn victims. Skin is used for mastectomy repairs, it's used to make bladder slings, it's used for cleft palate repairs, and even for wounds that won't heal. Instead of a synthetic graft, they can use a graft from a donor. So other tissues that can be recovered are bone. Bone is recovered from the legs and from the upper arm. And wherever a bone is removed, a plastic prosthetic is put in its place so that when the incision is closed and the person is dressed, the integrity and form of their body is maintained for their viewing. And bone, in the most dramatic of instances, can save someone from having to have an amputation. I met a nurse not too long ago. Her 11-year-old grandson was diagnosed with an osteosarcoma, or a bone tumor. And she said, you can only imagine how devastating explaining to a young child like that having cancer is. But in addition, he was supposed to have his leg amputated, and yet they were able to save his leg by transplanting the long bone from a deceased donor. That's just one example. In many other instances, bone is used for orthopedic surgeries, dental surgeries, things like back surgery. They can make small bone screws instead of metal screws, and people receive bone donation in surgeries every day. The difference between receiving an organ and receiving a tissue for the recipient is that if you receive tissue transplant, you don't need the immunosuppression or anti-rejection medication that an organ donor would take for the rest of their life. Other tissues I mentioned are tendons and ligaments. Many of you may know someone who has had a repair of a tendon or ligament and may very well have received that gift from someone who has died. As far as the veins, veins can be used for bypass surgeries and also to recreate a dialysis fistula in someone whose access has failed. So again, many, over 50 people, their lives can be significantly enhanced by the gift of tissue donation. We do have some work to do here in New Jersey. Currently, we have 35% of our population, 18 and older, who are asked if they'd like to have the donor designation on their driver's license, who say yes. We'd like to see that number up at least 50%, closer to the national average. There are some states in the United States who even have designation rates as high as 75%. Why might that be? Well, we live in a very ethnically diverse service area, and we recognize that we have to work hard to assure that we are providing support and education, meeting the needs of different cultural, religious groups, as well as different language barriers that we may need to overcome. And we really feel that through education like this, to both the professional and public community, that we are going to start to see those numbers increase even further. Another thing that we hear are some myths about organ and tissue donation. So some of it may come from even popular TV series. I often, when I'm out in the field speaking with groups, someone will mention to me, did you see this show? Did you see that movie or read this book? And yet they don't always have the story, present the story accurately of how the process takes place. And yet the reality is Those are the things that people see sometimes, and that's what they remember, and yet it's not the truth. One of the things that people ask is, if I have the donor designation on my driver's license, will I receive the same care if something happens to me? And I have to tell you that when someone comes into the hospital team is making every effort to do everything to save that person's life and support their family. And it's only when nothing more can be done that the hospital team looks to make a call to an organization like ours to see if something positive may be able to come out of it. The reality is, it's people who receive the most aggressive care, who receive critical care treatment, put on a ventilator, taken to a critical care unit. Everything is optimized, and yet, unfortunately, despite that, they suffer a neurologic death, or the family has elected to provide comfort care for them, withdraw mechanical support, and there are some organs available still medically suitable to be transplanted. Another thing I'll hear is it only sports figures, politicians, maybe people who have the resources who receive transplants? And yet every day I hear stories of people in our communities who receive gifts of transplant. This young girl here is a nursing student. She was in one of the classes that I spoke with recently. And at the end of the class, she shared with her fellow students that she had a bilateral corneal transplant. She's only 23 years old. She received that transplant when she was 21. No one in the class ever even knew that she had it. And they asked her, why didn't you ever tell us that? And she said, you know, my vision is fine. I really had no reason to share it. We're just having the conversation today, so I thought I would mention it. And I thought those are the day-to-day stories, again, of people whose lives are impacted. She had to drop out of nursing school for a period of time when she had lost her vision. And now with the transplant, she's back in school pursuing her degree. Another side of the truth is the impact on a donor family. I use this family's picture for a couple of reasons. Sometimes I'm asked, is there an age limit to being a donor? How young is too young, or how old is too old? And this family here, their little beautiful baby was an organ donor at only 6 weeks of age. Tragically, she died in a motor vehicle accident, and her family consented to give the gift of donation, and her heart saved another infant's life. Her 2 kidneys were actually transplanted into another young adult. And the truth on that side of the side of the story is that in speaking with this family, they say, you know, they don't know how they would go on except to know that their baby saved another mother from having to suffer a similar loss. Another thing you may ask is, does my religion support donation? Most major religions do support donation, and in fact, many of the major religions have come out with very formal statements about how it's the greatest gift or mitzvah to save someone else's life if you can. Others may leave it up to personal choice. I have to say, in the number of years I've been with New Jersey Sharing Network, I've seen both donors and recipients from so many different ethnic and religious backgrounds. These are the faces of just some of the members of our community who have been impacted by donation. This gentleman, a pastor, Baptist minister, he's actually waiting for a kidney transplant. This is a Christian family whose daughter and sister was an organ donor. In this picture here, Max had a mitzvah project for his bar mitzvah, and his mitzvah project was to increase awareness about donation in the Jewish community, and his little brother received a heart transplant. And here, some Catholic nuns during Donate Life Month, Donor Sabbath weekend, they had an event at their church to promote awareness about donation with their congregation. Another statistic that I need to share with you is 18. 18 is not only the age that someone needs to be to legally document their wish to be a donor, but 18 is also, unfortunately, the average number of people who die every day in this country waiting for an organ that does not become available in time. Alexa happens to be one of those people. I met her mother at a national conference a few years ago, and she gave me her picture as I was leaving to continue to inspire me to work and remember why we're trying to get this message out to people. Alexa was waiting for a lung transplant. I'm not sure if you could see, but she has some clubbing of her fingers. And she was at the top of the list, and her mother said, you know, the difficult part is that it wasn't for a lack of the technology and that there wasn't something out there that could have saved her life. There was. The reality is there's just not enough organs to go around. And her hope is, she said to me, I know there's nothing that can bring Alexa back, but if other people see her face and go home and talk with their families, or maybe make a designation to be a donor, something they might have been thinking about but haven't taken action on, then Alexa is making a difference. Where does it all start? Well, on the one hand, it starts with the conversation with your family, with your own personal decision, and hopefully making that designation to be a donor. I'll talk to you a little bit about how one can designate their wishes to be a donor in addition to at the motor vehicle agency in just a little bit. But from the hospital perspective, it begins with a call to our organization. Most often, it's the nurses who make that referral to us. Anyone can call us, and yet, for the most part, it is a nurse who calls us at our 800 number. We have a donor resource center here at the Sharing Network. They're really the hub of our organization where they receive all of those calls from the hospital. As far as the organ referral process, the staff call us when there is a patient who has a severe neurologic injury who's ventilator dependent. Once the ventilator has been removed for any period of time, the organs also fail. So it is the referral that we receive of a patient who is still on a ventilator, who has a Glasgow coma scale of 5 or less, or a loss of 2 or more cranial nerve reflexes, or when the family is discussing an end-of-life option, such as removing that ventilator, terminal extubation, that there may be potential for organ donation. So nursing staff call us within 1 hour of the patient meeting that clinical criteria, regardless of the patient's age or diagnosis. Again, if we receive the referral after the ventilator has already been removed, there will no longer be an opportunity for organ donation. So it's so important that we get the call at the clinical trigger. Nurses really, again, they're the eyes and ears of what's going on, able to give us such important information about the family when they call, what the plan is, and again, the neurologic status as well as the medical status of that patient. When we receive a referral, and after that initial screening, there appears to be some potential for organ donation, a transplant coordinator from New Jersey Sharing Network will respond to that hospital. And again, the nurses and other members of the healthcare team are so vital. We are visitors at a very difficult time. And so what we call huddle very often with the healthcare team to get information we need to determine medical suitability, to continue to preserve that opportunity for the person to be a donor and for the family to either be notified of their loved one's decision or to make a decision about donation because of the good care that patient is receiving. We ask that no one mentions organ donation or tissue donation to a family before the referral is made. We want to do an evaluation of medical suitability before we speak with a family. We wouldn't want someone well-meaning to offer donation to a family and then when the evaluation is complete, find out that unfortunately there's nothing possible to be donated. Then we have to go back to the family and kind of take that away. So we ask to receive the call within the hour of the clinical neurologic trigger, not to mention donation. If the family brings it up and has questions, then certainly when you call, share that information with us. Let the family know that you'll be calling someone who can help answer their questions. So the vast majority of people who are organ donors are those who've been pronounced dead by neurologic criteria or brain death. And brain death is very different than a coma. People may at times mention that they know of someone who woke up from a coma, and yet no one ever wakes up from brain death. Brain death is determined by clinicians, critical care specialists who are experts in the field, and it is conducted very carefully involving clinical examination that demonstrates the absence of all brain and brainstem reflexes. It includes demonstration that the patient is apneic or unable to initiate any breaths on their own. It's very different from a coma. As you can see in this picture here, which is a cerebral angiogram, on the left side is an angiogram for a patient who has normal blood flow, and on the right, someone who's brain dead with absolutely no brain flow at all. For a family who is looking at their loved one on a ventilator, who has a heart rhythm, blood pressure, is making urine, they're warm, tests are being done, it's very difficult. And at times I've seen a physician share a picture like this with a family to help them to understand the difference. And again, until they have come to terms with that, it would not be appropriate to have the conversation with them about donation, whether it's a notification of an existing wish by their loved one to be a donor, or asking them to make that decision about what their loved one would have wanted. This is another possible confirmatory type test that can be done in the determination of brain death. This is a nuclear medicine brain scan, and you can see the lack of uptake of the radionucleotide in this scan. If there was flow to the brain, that would be dark, but the white appearance shows that there's no blood flow. Interaction with the family, early interaction, support in a very sensitive and compassionate way is so important. We are guests, visitors at that hospital at a very difficult time, and we want to be with that family and offer them support in the same way that we would want if it was our loved one. And so rather than being with the family with the focus just about the offering the opportunity of donation or notifying them about that designation, we focus on being present to them, developing a relationship with them, trying to provide them support information that they may need, and then naturally the conversation will transition to a point where it's appropriate to talk about what happens next, an organ or tissue donation being just one of the possible end-of-life decisions that would be made. When we talk about optimizing the gift, once someone has died, the focus changes from all those efforts that were in place to try to save their life to now maximizing the number of gifts that can be recovered for transplant. For families who are honoring their loved one's decision or making the decision for their loved one to be a donor when they haven't had that designation already, it's comforting for them to know that as many people as possible can be helped. So when the transplant coordinator comes to the hospital, they work very closely with the healthcare team to manage the hemodynamic status, which becomes very challenging when someone is brain dead. If you look at the measurements, the parameters that are listed here, you'll see that they are very much just normal values. The transplant coordinators also bring with them some guidelines, donor management guidelines, that they can, in collaboration with the physicians and other members of the healthcare team, implement to maximize the gift. I'm often asked if there are 120,000 people waiting for organs and so few people who are able to be organ donors, how is it determined who's going to receive those organs? It is one national waiting list. UNOS, or the United Network for Organ Sharing, maintains the national database of people who are waiting. So no matter where someone is listed in the country for an organ, their name is in that same database. Some of the matching is as simple as blood type and size. So when someone is going to be a donor, the transplant coordinator at the donor hospital puts information about the donor into the computer, including their blood type and their size. Recipients who do not match that donor based on those criteria screen out. So a large number of the list are excluded on that initial running of the list just based on those criteria. The other individuals who are on the waiting list will move up on the list based on how sick they are or their degree of medical urgency, how long they've been waiting. So once someone is activated on the transplant waiting list, they start accruing points for time waiting and move up the list based on that. There are separate lists for each organ. The other aspect has to do with how long the organs can remain viable outside of someone's body. If you look here, both the heart and lungs, it's only 4 to 6 hours from when those organs are recovered until when they have to be transplanted and functioning again in the recipient. It's a short period of time. So the way the allocation or sharing of those organs takes place and the way the system works includes geography, concentric circles of miles away from the donor hospital to the transplant center, because it's recognized that it's important that those organs get to the centers and transplanted as quickly as possible. If you look at the kidneys, 24 to 36 hours, a much longer period of time that they can remain viable outside of the body. So because there is more time available, additional testing, HLA antigens, are tested between both donor and recipient. And so the level of compatibility in that regard is also a factor in how those organs are allocated. And if someone is a higher genetic match between donor and recipient, even if they're further away, they may receive some priority in receiving that organ. People who are donors, their family can direct a donation if they know someone who is waiting for an organ. As long as that person is a match and is actively listed on a waiting list, we are able to coordinate that as well. That happens on a rare occasion. One of the things we do when we get to the operating room, and again, the recovery of the organs and tissue takes place in the operating room, the organ at the donor hospital. The transplant teams come to the donor hospital to recover the organs and take them back to the transplant center. When we get into the OR, we have a moment of silence, of remembering and honoring the person and this incredible gift that they're giving at the end of their life. So families sometimes give us a prayer or a passage to read at that time, music to play, and it's a time where we can also, again, just stop. It's been very hectic from the moment of the referral to getting to the operating room. And this is an opportunity for us to support each other and also, most importantly, thank the donor who's giving this incredible gift. Our hospital partners, they have also, over the years, developed some wonderful ways to honor the donors from their hospitals. In this picture, a flag is being raised. And quite a few of the hospitals we work with now raise a flag in honor of the person who's been a donor for 24 hours after the recovery. Other hospitals have memorial gardens, walls, memorial wall of heroes, and teams who meet periodically to make sure that we're doing the absolute best that we can to support families and assure that every opportunity is provided. The family is at the center of what we do. These are pictures from our annual Donor Family Memorial Service. Every year we have this service. It's attended by about 500 donor family members, as well as some transplant recipients who share stories of how their life was impacted by the gift of their transplant. They receive a medal at that event from Department of Health and Human Services. It's a Gift of Life Donor Medal. They receive a rose. These shawls, comfort shawls, are crocheted by some of our volunteers and sent out to every donor family. At the event, we have a quilt pinning. You can see these pictures here, the Garcias here holding the quilt square that they designed in memory of their son, and this family here pinning the quilt. We have volunteers who later assemble the quilts into the finished product. They're displayed throughout our office, along with the names of every person who's ever been a donor in the history of our organization is somewhere along the walls in our office. Other things the Sharing Network does is to send a letter to the families after their loved one has been a donor to let them know the outcome of the transplants. Not every family wants to receive that information, but many do. With HIPAA, of course, we're not able to share with them specific name of the recipients, and yet we can tell them about how old was that person, what type of a disease were they suffering from that led them to need a transplant, and a little bit of other information maybe about the type of work they do or their families. Very often, recipients will now write thank you notes to donor families. They're encouraged to do so by the Transplant Center and even offered assistance in writing those letters if they're struggling. We receive that letter from the recipient. We don't have any name on it when it's forwarded to the donor family. We would reach out to the donor family, make sure that they'd like to receive that information, that letter. Most often they do. We will forward it to them, and sometimes they write back then to the recipient through the same similar process. And over time, if a donor family and recipient would like to meet each other, it happens periodically, we are able to help facilitate that. If you look at this picture on the right, the woman standing there, her young daughter was an organ donor, and the gentleman she's standing with received her daughter's heart, and they did have the opportunity to meet each other. She was listening to her daughter's heartbeat in his chest, and it was pretty incredible. If you can see, she's holding a medal that he gave her. He won that medal at the National Transplant Games in an event that he competed in and won the medal. These are other donor families, and I think one of the really important things I've learned is that it's just important to them that their loved one isn't forgotten, that they're extending that legacy well beyond the actual transplantation. And they come together and support each other at support group meetings. They're wearing their 5K t-shirts here. Many of them put teams together to come out and honor and celebrate the life of their loved one. And they're also standing in front of a wall, our Landscape of Life wall. So many of these families have even made contributions to provide ongoing education and other initiatives to increase donation. And to honor them and thank them for that gift, their loved ones' names are on this wall. So just to review with you the several ways that there are to register to be a donor, the first one being at the Motor Vehicle Agency. When you first get your license, and each time you renew your license, it's important to say yes when you're asked that question. If you don't say yes each time you renew your license, it will go away. It does not automatically carry over. So it's important to remember to check that box. Another way to register is online. Not everyone has a driver's license, or maybe someone wants to register to be a donor before their license is up for renewal. So if you go to either the Motor Vehicle Agency website or njsharingnetwork.org's website, there's a link to register to be a donor, and you will be in the same registry as if you had registered at the motor vehicle office. The only thing is it won't appear on your license. And I also want to mention, it says organ donor, but what that means is at the time of my death, any organ or tissue that's medically suitable for transplantation, not education or research, that's not covered under that. That would be a separate consent from your family or in your advance directive or living will if that's something that you would also like to do. But this is organ and tissue for transplantation. That's what that means, and when you register online. You can also, there's a paper registry that could be sent in to the motor vehicle agency if you prefer, and we can provide that for you if you call the sharing network or go to our website. We can get that to you. The other way is your advance directive or living will. But if you put it in your advance directive and living will, it's very important to share the existence of that document with your family and your wishes. We recommend making sure that you're in the registry online. Again, if you take nothing else from this presentation, please share your wishes with your family and make sure that you know what their wishes would be as well. Facebook has a link that says organ donor under life event. And I just want to let you know that that is just a great way to share with your family and friends your wishes and the fact that you are a donor or you want to be a donor, and yet that's not the registry. Just want to be clear that that's not the way that you register to be a donor. There are so many opportunities to volunteer. If you or someone you know is interested, go to the Sharing Network website and you can find out more information about that. There are great ideas from assisting at health fairs, public speaking events. I mentioned about some volunteers who even crochet or quilt. Some come to our office and help out in different ways, but there are so many ways to give back, and we currently have about 300 registered volunteers with New Jersey Sharing Network. We'd love if your hospital that you work with or your family, friends, wherever you work as a nurse, if you'd love to come out and join us for our 5K walk run that we have every year. It's always the second Sunday in June, so we would love to see you there. Thank you very much.